My guest today was David Dulany at Tenbound, where we spoke at length about starting a company for the very first time. Most employees don't know what goes into starting a business, making payroll, finding customers, and the other 1,000 things that go into running a business. If you're considering stepping out on your own, this is the episode for you.
Welcome to the Kaizen Podcast.
Well, cool. Thanks, David. I appreciate you being on the show. The topic today we're going to talk through is moving from, an individual contributor and taking the leap of starting your own business. And so I'd love to start out with just a brief intro so people can get a sense of who you are and what you're doing. We can talk about that evolution, how you made that move.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited to talk with you about this. This is really top of mind for me right now as I go into my third year of entrepreneurship. My name's David Dulany. I started a company called Tenbound, going on 3 years now. And prior to that, I was working in tech companies on sales development teams, running these teams and building up the programs. And it kind of led to a natural evolution of doing training and consulting and running events and research projects on the sales development industry with Tenbound. And it's been great. And yeah, I mean, Kyle, you've been such a mentor to me, and I just appreciate you, bringing me on.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited to hear more of the story of how you came to where you are today. And I think being in Silicon Valley, you're working for several companies and going through this iteration, the culture that we were exposed to in our old roles was very much like venture capital. You scale some software company, that's the process you go through. But you going down kind of the consulting route is kind of a different tack that I think a lot of people who want to start their own businesses go down because they don't necessarily want to take on VC or growth in that way. So consulting is kind of like an not easy avenue, but it's an avenue that seems more accessible. How did you decide that consulting was going to be the jam? How did that come to be?
Yeah, it's funny. I wish that I could say, I scored a grand slam at one of the startups that I was at.
Yeah.
And I had this huge cushion, but it didn't happen that way at all. I mean, I, had a couple of good runs at some great companies, got into some not so great companies.
Sure.
And found myself at a crossroads. And, I had been what I call a wantrapreneur for a long time. I mean, we're talking 10 years. You're reading all the books, watching, Gary Vaynerchuk videos, and just fantasizing really about what it would be like to go the entrepreneurship route.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I was at this crossroads, and I was in the marketplace, looking for another director or higher level manager of sales development. And I had the opportunity sort of fall into my lap of a friend of mine who was starting a sales development program and was looking for not necessarily a full-time employee, but someone who could consult and help with, forming the program, putting the processes together, doing some recruiting. And it was just a great match. I got a little taste of it, and I was like, oh my God, I'm actually doing this thing that I had fantasized about for so long, making a few bucks. I give a huge credit to my wife, who also works and was able to help with some of the rough spots. We've got a couple of kids, mortgages, cars, all the stuff that you get in Silicon Valley. And she's been an amazing support, but it gave us a little bit of runway to be able to do it. And Kyle, I mean, to your question, when I first started to think about, I was at that crossroads, should I become an employee again or go the entrepreneurship route? I looked at getting together with a technical co-founder, floating it for a while, coming up with a product. And, it took me a while to figure out what is a need in the marketplace that we see in sales development specifically, because that's what I was in, and talking to people and trying to get a readout on what should we build that would scale and, really fulfill a need in the marketplace. And I was just kind of stumped. I mean, there's so many great solutions out there that what became more interesting to me was taking a high level view of the entire sales development industry, and looking at things from a high level and trying to create information, products, and advice and consulting that would help people just figure out what to do in the sales development space. And that's sort of just evolved over the last couple of years into what we do at Tenbound.
So it initially started with you being in between jobs and just having kind of a side hustle, to kind of cover your time. So you just started doing some work for a buddy kind of on the side while you're in between jobs naturally. And then were you already thinking that sales development space needed help, or did the fact that you got a little bit of work open that concept up to you?
Yeah, exactly. So No, it was the second thing. I mean, I got a little bit of work, a few bucks started to come in, and a few other gigs started to show up. I was like, okay, there is actually a need here for sort of a freelance help, on the side for people that need help with their sales development program.
Yeah.
And then, at the same time, it was like, I'm not feeling like a product that can necessarily plug a hole in the market. But what I do see is just a need for trusted information and trusted research and trusted advice in the sales development space. And I was like, this is a niche that we could potentially fill. And it just kind of grew organically from that.
Yeah. And it's funny because like my belief is that you should start a business around something you already know well. So like if you're to try to start an app for buying a car, you may know a ton about that space, but that feels like such a big leap between what you're doing in your past and now consulting. And so I think a lot of folks feel this pressure to create this like gigantic billion-dollar app when there's so much wood to chop in these companies that can add real value to other companies today with the experience you already have. And it sounds like you've kind of followed that path of taking like the skill set you've got and just like leverage the hell out of that rather than try to come up with something new that you've never experienced or spent time in.
Yeah, I mean, I got lucky in a lot of ways because it just happened that sales development for me is interesting. It's fascinating. There's a ton to learn. There's still a lot of like white space in the industry. There's so much to learn. It's such a challenge. There's also a lot of really interesting people and technology that's involved in it. So it's interesting to me. And it was just easy to, want to really, really focus on that and offer something that I didn't really see out there in the market. It reminds me that I think his name is Kevin Systrom. He's the founder of Instagram, or one of the founders of Instagram. And I saw a video of him talking about how, he was a photographer, at the beginning, right? And he was always like trying to mess around with filters and make, pictures more interesting. And then that just sort of, evolved into this thing that became a huge thing. And it's probably harder for people that are they're trying to figure out like, what am I interested in? They haven't really bumped into it yet. And they're trying to figure out like, is something that could be interesting and motivating and fascinating for me and make that something that could actually pay the bills.
Yeah.
I think that's a really hard process, but yeah, if you can find it, then it's like, dude, I love Mondays. I mean, I can't wait to like get back into what I was doing and talk to people like you and just build like the more and more interest in what I'm doing. And it's like, that was not there like, a few years ago.
Yeah. And that's what I found as well, starting your own company. Like there's nothing I care more about this in my career. Like I care about this more than anyone ever will. And so every Monday when I wake up, I'm so pumped to get to work. And that's definitely something that I was lacking when I was an individual contributor, even a director in a company. So I just can't feel totally bought into a company that I'm not a part of. So now that I've had a taste of what it's like to be on my own, I could never go. If you listen to this and you're interviewing me right now for a job, you probably shouldn't hire me because I'm not going to be a great employee because I'm just not that committed to it. But when you've got a mortgage on the line and a family you got to support, like you don't have a choice but to be committed to it, right?
Oh my God. I mean, it becomes your baby. And it's like, if you've been out in the wild for a little bit and you're feeding yourself, you're not quite starving and eating pine cones and digging for grubs, like you're doing okay. You can't imagine going back to captivity, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I bet there's a lot of the people listening on here making way more money. They've got way more benefits. They're doing way better than I am. But the thing is, for me, it's like, I could never imagine going back because the frustration and the politics and the crap that you have to wade through on a daily basis, it just was getting to me after a while. And this has been, I mean, my health has improved. My attitude has improved. I'm showing up more for my family. Like, I mean, it's been amazing.
Yeah. And part of it is that like everyone's a good captain in calm seas. Like we're in a good market, things are growing. Like it's just good time generally to be doing this. And so it makes it helpful when it's not, I'm making payroll or I'm going to make my mortgage payment. I got to pick one. Of course, if that happened, like stress happened, you're ripping out hair, that's bad times. And so we're fortunate that we're in a position where the market is doing well and demanding what you and I are asking for. So that makes it nice. But I'd love to get more into like some of the tactical stuff. So like you had a buddy who's offering you some business. You're starting to feel like there's some need here in the market. How do you decide to, okay, I'm actually going to start a business and not just 1099 under this company? At what point did you make that call? Was it customer 2, 3, 10, 50? Like at what point did that become a serious thing versus just doing some side work while you're looking for another job?
Yeah, I mean, so from day one, set up payroll for myself through. There was one employee, right, and I had to really discipline myself to make that payroll every month, or otherwise, and it wasn't very much. I mean, it was like a quarter or one third of what I was making in the corporate world, but I still had to make it. And it's like, so that was kind of the first nut. It was like, okay, I know that I've got to go out and hustle for business enough to make that payroll every month. Otherwise, it's just ridiculous. I don't want to send that email to the bookkeeper and go, sorry, I don't run payroll this month for one person. That, like, come on, you know? So, and then thing number 2 was like, okay, have I banked up enough money to be able to bring somebody in to help me out? Do I have enough business right now in the pipeline to, you know, get a contractor to help me to take some of the business that's coming in? You know, if you've heard of a book, I'm sure everybody has, like, it's called E-Myth Revisited. Can I spend a little bit more time working on the business to create like a system versus always having to be on delivery? You know, that was the thing. Can I make payroll for the one person that's on the payroll? Do I have enough money banked to either hire some people or enough pipeline to do some contractors? And then am I able to spend a little bit more time designing the business so that I don't necessarily have to deliver? You know, if those 3 things start to come in place, then it becomes more of a business than just me going out and doing consulting.
Yeah. And so the point where it becomes serious is when you realize you have that runway, you're generally making payroll for a few months in a row. And at that point, you're like, there's no question I'm never going to go back again. Is that at the point where that come up?
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, this is like, we're talking about bootstrapping, right?
Sure.
I mean, this is like when I'm not ready right now to ever go to somebody and go, hey, give me like $250,000 because I'm going to make it worth your while. You know, I'm going to pay you back in millions and trillions. I mean, I'm just not ready for that right now. Plus, I want to own this. I mean, it's like I've been working my ass off on this for 3 years. And it's like, I'm just not ready right now dividing up the pie. What I'm talking right now is like, if you want to just bootstrap the shit out of your business, like this is how you do it. You bank cash so that you can make payroll and like pay all your bills, you know? And then as you do that, you continue to expand and, you can sleep at night.
Yeah. And your deals are all kind of project based, right? So you're doing like a 3, 6, 9 month or 12-month engagement with folks.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got a pretty diversified lineup now. And looking back in the past, it was, starting out, it was 3, 6 months, usually a 90-day contract and monthly payments due on receipt, stuff like that. And then we started to offer, we have training programs that are standalone. We do workshops with executives on aligning their programs and stuff like that. So we've got more of a diversified lineup. We've got a little bit of a media business now with the podcast and the webinars, the events and stuff like that. But back in the day, it was just like scoping out a project, putting in a PO for 90 days and then working it.
Yeah. So, and how would you did you have, when you first started, do you have some sort of sense of like, if I can't sign a customer every quarter, this isn't working, like I'm going to jet out? Or is it like, I got to get one every month? Or how did you think about that? Because your deals are relatively lumpy, I'm guessing, like, oh, we got a customer, we're going to focus a lot of time on it. But what sort of metrics did you set for yourself early on to make sure you're still on the right track? Because at a certain point, you got to look at other metrics, but your initial ones are actually pretty critical, right?
Yeah, big time. I mean, and it goes back to the payroll metric.
Okay.
Really. Kyle, like first it was, do I have enough business coming in the door to be able to hit that every month consistently? Because that means that although I'm not bringing in as much income as I was like when I was in the corporate world, I am contributing. I'm keeping my promise. Like I would say, it was much more rear view. Like if I look back to that first year or two and I was missing payroll month after month, I wasn't able to pay myself and I wasn't growing or expanding, then it would have been like a kitchen table discussion. Like, dude, what are you doing?
This is a hobby now. Yeah.
I mean, are you just like, what are you doing? Just having, even though it was, again, it wasn't as much, it was like just having that come in. It's like, okay, I know that he's up there, like in his little office, like doing something every day and we're cool. And then from a goals perspective, it was like, well, you got to get back to where you were when you were an employee from a gross, income perspective. And so we got to work toward that. And then, hopefully at the end of the year, it's like, is there something left over? I mean, what are we doing here? Like, we're not like working for some startup where hopefully, you're going to get $1 million because the shares are worth something. I mean, we got to have cash like right now. So, yeah.
I remember the first customer I signed from a consulting perspective was like, when I got a check in the mail was the most gratifying. First I had to cash it, but it felt like incredible that I had started a business. Someone contacted me and wanted to use whatever I was offering, and they gave me money for it. Like it's different than selling a deal in a company that you work for, because someone did a lot of the work to build the product and get it to market. You're just kind of continuing that on. But when you have your own business and someone is it's more than just your business. They're trusting you, right? They're saying, David, I'm going to hand you the money because you are going to solve whatever problem I'm asking you to solve for, is really gratifying. And I feel like you can't get that as an individual contributor or VP anywhere, because it's not 100% you.
It's ridiculously gratifying. And the other thing I'll one up you on that is when you can pull out the company checkbook and write yourself a check.
Yeah.
It's about. I mean,
Yeah.
if you think about that, it's like there was an old Jim Rohn thing where it was like, someone came to him and was like, hey, I need a raise. And he was like, sure, dude, go ahead, write yourself a check.
Yeah.
Make it for the unlimited amount. It's just that mentality of like doing it yourself and then being able to pay yourself. It's good.
The tactic I took to like being able to step away in my own consulting business was like very different than yours. So like I actually started mine when I was still working for a company. I was doing like Operation Salesforce stuff, and the person I'd worked with had left to go to another company and was like, hey, can you help me set up Salesforce in the same way, nights and weekends? I'm like, for sure, I got time. And I loved a little bit of extra cash. So I did that. I found that when I opened myself up to the world of like, I do some Salesforce consulting, all of a sudden, like all this pent up demand just came in that never would have come to me otherwise. Like I talked about it a little bit. Those people kind of talked to other people about it a little bit. And all of a sudden I was top of mind when people had Salesforce questions. And so I started getting a bunch of referrals from folks, which I didn't anticipate. And then I set this metric of like, when I get 5 customers that are paying me every month a certain amount, I'll just quit my job. It'll be pretty clear that I can make this work. And I hit that milestone and I go, there's no chance I'm quitting my job. There's no way I'm going to do it because I got health insurance and like a steady gig. And so I kept moving that yardstick out. And eventually I got to the point where like my night and weekends work was making as much as my day job. And that's where I felt like, okay, I can step away from this. So I very much like, that feels gutsy that you just like, we're in between jobs and you're going to make it happen. Mine was like, I'm taking a very lateral step because I was like hesitant about jumping in with both feet, where you kind of like went headfirst into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, we're in a time now where it's definitely possible for the barrier to entry for entrepreneurship is a lot lower than it was 10 or 20 years ago when I came in. It is totally doable for people to make it happen. The flip side of that is that, hey, we have been in a progression for a number of years. And so the economy is really good right now. And I've seen it go really bad a couple of times, really bad. And so we've got to be ready for that. The other thing is, if you've been at it for a while and it's not working, and the self-discipline has been really educational for me, because it's like nobody's telling you what to do.
Yeah.
Like you wake up in the morning and you can do whatever you want, dude. You can just mess around all day if you want. And it's like, if you've been an employee for a long time and your boss is always telling you what to do and like everything's all structured, going from that environment to this it's a pretty jarring, and you definitely have to learn a lot about yourself, I think, in the process.
Yeah. And so like, there's a big difference between when you're first starting a business and saying, if I make payroll, we're good to go. How do you continue to make sure that you're on track for where you want to be? Like, I'm kind of like, I put my finger to the wind. I'm like, we're making more money than last month. Things must be going good. But I'm guessing you might be a little bit more organized or disciplined about that. Like, how do you think about your goal setting internally and then holding yourself accountable? Because like, even when I set goals, I may not meet them, but I kind of just like let it go. Do any of that like on any sort of consistent basis, or are you just kind of winging it like I am?
Yeah, I mean, well, so we're kind of past the point now where we're feeding ourselves and we're making payroll, consistently, and we're bringing people on and people are helping us out. And that now we're responsible for making payroll of 5 or 6 people.
Sure.
So it's like, okay, now we got to tighten up a little bit. So I looked at the gross revenue from 2018, and I said we need to 10x. And it's kind of a moonshot because I did probably a Hallmark card or something, but it's like if you shoot for the moon and you end up for the stars, yeah, you're still in space. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But what I set it up for is we're going 10x. Okay. And the reason I did that is because I got this from a guy named Dan Sullivan, who is an amazing like entrepreneurial thinker. And everybody who's listening to this, Dan Sullivan completely changed my life. Go and Google him and learn everything you can about the guy. But Dan Sullivan basically said, like, looking at your gross revenue and saying, okay, next year maybe we'll go 2x or we'll go X. Like, you can still be plugging away and like doing the same stuff, but just working a little bit harder instead of working like 50 hours a week. Now you're working 60 hours a week to double the gross. Instead, just make it 10x. I mean, make it, and it just challenges you to go, I have to completely rethink what I'm doing because there's no way that I'm already working like 60 hours a week just to make what we're making right now.
Yeah.
And so I can't work 120 hours a week.
Or 600 hours a week. If you want to 10x, you can't 10x your time.
You can't 10x your time. The only way that you can do it is by, becoming really smart about documenting processes, finding people to help you, finding new income streams, developing new products, meeting new people, going to more networking events and stuff like that. I mean, you have to like completely rearrange your whole thought process. So from a goals perspective, hey, if we miss 10x, then if it's like 3 or 4x, that's what it would have been anyway. It wouldn't have been exciting.
Yeah, interesting. I've read Grant Cardone's like the 10x rule or whatever like that. I'm not a huge fan of him personally, but the concept kind of makes sense. Like, because a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with how do I get out of the minutia and actually think about growing the business at a macro level, and setting a goal of 10x and just saying, well, I'm going to send more emails, I'm going to spend more time on calls, and we'll get to 10x. That's not going to happen. You have to have a plan to 10x your business in a year, right? You have to like really focus on growth. And that's something that I had a hard time until like this last 6 months of just like, how can I focus time on the forest and not the trees? Because it's so easy to get sucked in as an entrepreneur. Because like as an entrepreneur, you are used to being the person who does everything. When you're your only person, you have to kind of get away with it for a while until you can make payroll. And then the first thing you do is slough things off. So what did you find that the first things you handed off to other people?
Oh God. I mean, it's just the administrative stuff. I mean, one of the first things that helped me out a lot was just working with a virtual administrator who had control over the calendar and could go into my email. I mean, I obviously trusted trusted the person implicitly. It was just being able to, instead of like, with minutia and administrative things, it's like, it's not just a thing on your to-do list. When you double click on every single one of those, there's like 25 steps sometimes. You got to go to the website, you got to check in, you got to call somebody. And so even if you only have like 20 things on your to-do list, that's actually more like 200, know?
Yep.
And so the beautiful thing about having a trusted, awesome virtual assistant is that you can just have a phone call, like a 30-minute phone call, and you talk through everything.
Yeah.
And you're able to empower them. And then all of a sudden, that minutia that was like really spinning your wheels, is gone, and you can focus on more big picture stuff. And it's really hard. I mean, being an employee for 20 years and having to do everything yourself. And it was on you because it was your job, and then even when we grow up in school, it's like collaboration, you can't collaborate on a test. Like you can't bring stuff in, but as an entrepreneur, your whole life is collaboration, and that kind of stuff. So it's just completely rewiring and being okay with like talking through something with somebody who's super competent and letting them take the reins a little bit. So,
yeah. And you kind of have to trust your gut that like, I feel like my thesis about what my business is solving for is accurate. I'm going to keep going in that direction. You may make changes, but like ultimately you're deciding the direction of the business. How did you, it seemed like initially you're like, it's clear that people need help from a strategy side of SDR stuff, but how did you see that hey, I should move sideways into media and I should put out a podcast. And I should put out, a bunch of other content. Like, how did you realize that you should be moving sideways and not just focus on your core? Because I think a lot of companies get feedback that like do one thing really well instead of 10 things kind of poorly. So how do you make that decision of like, okay, we're doing this well enough that I can branch into another thing? Like, how does that come to be?
Yeah, I mean, again, like, having a partner, a business partner, and my wife is my business partner,
Sure.
but she runs her own business as well, so she's really busy. But I think that's one of the values of like having a partner or having investors to be like, dude, your idea is stupid, like that's not going to work,
Wives are
and
good for that. Wives are good for that.
she's too nice to say that, but she's super supportive. But I think one of the values of having a lot of people that are involved in the decision making process is they can shoot down like crazy ideas. I don't have that as a bootstrapped entrepreneur. What determines whether something's working or not for me is the marketplace. Like, and I've launched a bunch of stuff like over the last 3 years that has just thud. It's fallen, and I thought they were like the coolest thing in the world. Nobody wanted it. But then other things, like all of a sudden people are just like, dude, let me give you money. Like what do I literally have had situations where people have been like, what do I need to do to like give you money? And okay, you just have to be smart enough. I mean, even a dunce, like me can figure out like, okay, we need to double down on the thing where the guy, wants to give me a bunch of money and let the other thing like wither on the vine because nobody wants it.
Yeah. And it's so easy to fall into the trap of, oh, this is broken. Squeaky wheel gets a grease. I'm going to put time into that. When in reality is you should be leaning into all the things that are working and leverage the hell out of those versus trying to make all the things that are broken work.
Yeah. And I think it's one of the advantages of operating in a good economy right now, because even the throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks like strategy, and me thinking something's really cool and then putting it out of the marketplace and it thuds, because we've been in a pretty good economy, like I've been able to survive by doing that. But I can imagine like, if a couple of years from now, like if things go off the rails, you're not going to be able to do that. I mean, or you're only going to have like a couple of months before you run out of money. Eventually it just became clear, like there's a niche, there's interest, and there's a lot of confusion out there in the marketplace about sales development. And so if we can offer, a guiding light for people that's trusted and gives them good information, then they're going to, there's value there and they're going to work with us.
Yeah. And one challenge I felt when I was starting my business is that I had a very hard time making the investments of like hiring an EA and, making investments in the business because it was my money, right? Like when money comes into the business, it doesn't belong to the company you work for. It's yours. If you upgrade to business class and you didn't really need it, that's now business class money that's out of your pocket. And so that was a transition that took me a while to get comfortable with, of like, look, I'm just going to pay myself X, whatever's extra is reinvested in the business with the idea that that'll grow. Did you have that ability to like disassociate the business's money from your money right away? Or is that something that you had to kind of grow into?
No, I still feel that way. I
It's hard.
I look at everything from, the perspective of like, if I spend this money, if I hire this person, if I buy this advertising package, if I do anything, like it's coming right out of my own pocket, which is it's a very pedestrian, like I feel like it holds the business back, because what you said is brilliant in that you made payroll to yourself. I would really recommend, like if anybody's thinking about doing this, the first thing that you do is set up payroll, because that really, for an undisciplined person like me, it keeps you on track. So you made payroll to yourself, and then you look at the other part of it is either you could pay yourself more at the end of the year, or you can reinvest it into your business. And the smarter thing to do is reinvest it in a really smart way into your business, because looking at the long game, that's going to make you way more money in a few years. Hire more. And I get jealous, like when I read in TechCrunch that so-and-so, raised $10 million, because I was like, God, if I had $10 million, I think I'd probably do a lot of dumb things, but I could hire a bunch of people to like, grow the business and make it awesome. And instead it's like, okay, I got to wait another year, got to bank a bunch more money, got to make sure that I can pay them. And it's like, it makes it so slow.
Yeah. Bootstrapping a company, I think a lot of folks think is maybe the ideal way, because then you don't have to deal with investors and all that. And I kind of agree with it, but it's really hard being hamstrung by money. I would love to put out killer content every week that's the best on the internet, but it costs a ton of money. And that's like potentially my mortgage payment if I end up making, it's a trade-off between what I want to do. And so I think that that's something I'm personally still working through. Maybe I need to hire a therapist for, but I think that anyone who's bootstrapped a company has felt that pressure of there's so much I want to do, but I'm just so stuck without having money. And then, I mean, you can go get lines of credit, but those are kind of risky too, right? Economy might go bad tomorrow. So it's a little scary to do those things, but it's definitely, if you can get past that, you're at such an advantage, because like money is like a lever for your business. It can either be a gigantic lever or it can be a tiny one. And if you can figure out how to apply it as a large lever, I mean, sky's the limit. Cause like if you can put in $1 and you get 10 back, let's put all 10 back into that lever and get 100 and then turn that into 1,000 and kind of keep going with that. So it's a hard thing to do to scale a business from a bootstrap perspective, but it seems like where you're at, you've started to scale, you've got a bunch of things going on. You got an event coming up here in a few weeks. So there's a lot happening. So you're definitely beyond the, I've got a couple of customers and I'm trying to figure out if this is the right thing. This is definitely the career you're picking. Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, this has been, it's honestly like the best, the best thing from a career perspective that I've ever done. And I, like I said, I mean, I'm just excited about getting up every day and being able to do it. I mean, there's a lot of, like Elon Musk said, you know, starting a company is like eating glass and staring into the abyss. You know?
Yeah.
Which is totally true, but it's hilarious because it's like, I wouldn't want to do anything else.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, wait, I'm staring into the abyss and eating glass, but I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. It's a weird dichotomy. But yeah, I mean, the bootstrapping is a way to go. I mean, I just can't imagine like being in a scenario where somebody gives me, you know, $1 million and they go, we're going to invest in your company. And then nothing, like it doesn't go anywhere. Like what happens to those people?
Yeah.
Like, there's got to be, all you ever hear about is people get millions of dollars in funding and then they get bought out by like this bigger company and they're like rich and stuff.
Yeah.
But are there there's got to be like a lot of people out there that get these investment funds and then the company goes nowhere and they're like, sorry, I never hear about that. But I can't imagine being in that kind of pressure cooker environment. It just seems too much for me.
Yeah. I was talking to someone because I was considering taking funding at one point, and someone would go, and I was like, I have the same concern of like, man, I certainly don't want to do friends and family because I don't want to lose their money. And someone goes, you can't have that mentality that you're going to lose this money. You have to believe in what you're going to do. And it's like, I do believe in myself, but at the same time, it's not a no risk situation. There's always risk. And the relationship I have with people, I don't know that I would be a good person to take money from friends and family. I'd take it from a VC because they're counting on me losing anyways. But friends and family just seems like that's too high stakes. I don't want to mix business and pleasure in that sense. I think nothing.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, yeah, like if there's any VCs listening to this, like give me a call. And
yeah.
what do you guys do with, you know, guys and gals? What do you do with entrepreneurs who you give them $1 million and they come back in 3 years and they're like, sorry, didn't work? I mean,
I think they go, okay, well, we got one for a bill, so we're gonna cut the loss here and eat it. Because you got to figure, if I was talking to someone who's a venture capitalist and he goes, we invest $400 million every 4 years and we're investing 10 million at a time. So that's 40 investments over 4 years. That's only 40 companies. One of them has to become $1 billion company, if not two. So I'm like, okay, you invested 400 mil, you got maybe a billion out of it. That seems like a pretty good return. Even if you sloughed off 30 million in losses or 300 million in losses, you're still up 600 million bucks in 4 years.
That sounds pretty good.
Sounds not so bad. So I mean, maybe
we're working too hard here, but for me, it's just like, I'm just like ahead of the game. I can eat and I can be, I mean, just circling back to the beginning of the conversation, like I feel like I'm a freedom fighter. Mm-hmm. I mean, like at this point in my life, I'm fighting for the freedom and the ability to do what I want to do and spend time with people that I like and about topics that I'm excited about and be able to do that on a daily basis. Every day is a blessing, you know, in that freedom. You know, money is super important to that. It's super important to that. And I wish that I had like $100 million in the bank, but I don't. So this is what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good spot to wrap up. It was great talking to you, to hear your path to becoming an entrepreneur and you know, starting your own consulting company. And speaking of which, you've got your own podcast and there's a segment on it for Freedom Fighters itself, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we're talking to people who made that jump either successfully or unsuccessfully from employee to entrepreneur as like a little breakout series on the podcast. So it's been really interesting to talk to those people.
Well, good. Yeah. Well, thanks so much. How else can folks follow you? Again, you got a big event coming up, so I definitely want to give the opportunity to plug what's coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sales Development Conference, Kyle Morris is a keynote speaker on the ops track with
Greg Dolly.
your co-speaker. Sorry, go ahead.
Greg Dolly. Yeah, he and I are going to be speaking.
Greg Dolly. Sorry about that. And so that's really exciting. That's August 23rd in San Francisco. That's our big event, the Sales Development Conference. So we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'll be there. How else can folks follow you so they can kind of keep up to date with how the business is going?
Yeah, definitely. So Tenbound is TENBOUND.com, tenbound.com. And then over on LinkedIn, it's Dulany, DULANY. That's usually where people get caught up. So follow us on there. And yeah, definitely. I'd love to talk to anybody about any of these topics that we've been going into.
Yeah, thanks so much for being on the show.
You got it. Thank you, Kyle.
Cool.